Moving the needle on founder failure, one conversation at a time. I'm your host, Justin Gordon, and welcome to Startup 2.0 by Spark XYZ. Join us each week as we give you access to some of the top investors and entrepreneurs in the country to help you think through and overcome the top challenges that startups face.
I think there's no better place in the country to be investing than Los Angeles.
What is the problem that you're solving and for who? Like, what is that specific pain point?
Sometimes when a company is not listening to its customers and just thinks it knows better than its customers, has a really, really hard time finding product market fit.
I want to see somebody that isn't going to stop. You know, this person, you just feel like they're gonna make it work.
Today's guest is Dean Kline, who's the managing director of USC's Rossier EdVentures Incubator. Dean was also formerly the founder and managing director of Penn Venture Partners. Dean, welcome to the show.
Yeah, welcome.
There's a lot to obviously chat about with two different types of funds, but what we want to start with first is just looking at EdVentures.
Right.
What's your involvement with that? What are you focused on with that right now?
Yeah, so we started that about a year and a half ago. So there were three basically managing directors, and I'm the senior managing director.
Okay.
But we've known each other for some time, and the one partner, I've known him for about 15 years, apart from USC.
Yeah, and where exactly are you focused on investing with EdVentures, and what's your involvement in terms of where you're kind of looking at with that?
Yeah, so anything that involves the intersection of education and technology, whether it's early childhood through workforce, and in our case too, what we try to do is look for companies that have kind of a positive impact on access to quality education.
Yeah.
And that's also a goal for the Grad School of Education at USC Rossier. So
yeah.
we follow that.
Awesome. And then with that too, like, how much are you investing in companies, or how does this whole thing work with it?
Yeah. We decided not to do that early on. So we've had some experience doing education accelerators, and we thought, okay, this time around, no fees, no equity, make it very simple, and see how that changes the dynamic between us and the entrepreneur, which I think it does.
Yeah, and then for that, then how is your program run? Like, how does that work with bringing these companies in then?
Yeah, so we a few things we decided early on, which is education is being more personalized, and it's also hybrid for the most part. We know that works.
Yeah.
Right? So, but yet, accelerators, even if they're education accelerators, you have a residency requirement. Fine, but and then the curriculums are almost identical. Whether you're doing hospitality or some deep tech or whatever, but the core curriculum's the same.
Yeah.
So we wanted to personalize the curriculum, and that means that we try to avoid telling them what they need. We do sort of deep interviews with them, figure out 2-3 ways in which we think we can really be helpful. And then among all the companies, there will be some things that are common. So we'll do workshops on those, but those workshops are entirely virtual.
Okay.
We'll do them once a month. And then that also allowed us to take companies from outside the U.S.
Yeah.
and outside this time zone.
Yeah, and with that too, then how are you sourcing companies for the program?
Yeah, it's still this sector's still fairly tight, and we also decided we were going to run this lean, so kind of practice what we preach.
Yeah,
and so we, if you're going to put out widespread call for applications, over time you're going to get hundreds. And as a VC, I know what it's like going through that, and it's, it just takes too much administrative time. So we just decided basically we're going to scout the companies ahead of time.
Okay.
And so that takes 6 months to a year. Before we started the first cohort, so a year ago, we had known some of these companies for some time.
Yeah.
And I should say the other thing that was important to us, that struck us about education accelerators, is although the practitioners are mainly women, even up through workforce and HR departments. And if you're in an urban area where equitable access is really important, people of color. But if you do an EdTech accelerator, most of them are going to be white guys like me.
Yeah.
Right? And they're the ones who typically get funded. And but this was especially a mismatch as far as we were concerned. So we wanted to focus on founders who are women and people of color. Not very specifically, but really just say, hey, you're wanted, and please apply. And so we did look particularly for companies like that.
Yeah, and can you go a little bit deeper into that diligence process then you evaluate these companies with?
Yeah, we have a list of sort of 10 things that are important to us, and it's kind of the basic stuff. Commitment. Whether you've already raised some money, although we try and also have a diversified cohort with respect to that. So some companies already raised $2 million, some have raised none.
Yeah.
But we believe in synergy and diversity, and so we also want founders who we think can communicate well with one another and help out. We don't particularly want folks who are very individualistic. I mean, we want some synergy among the companies.
Yeah, and with that too, I mean, how many different companies are you taking with each cohort?
Yeah, so we've done this twice now, and each time we've taken more than we said we would, and at 16.
16.
Yeah.
Okay, 16. And how long is the program itself?
About 7 months. So beginning really kind of October, November, and then we do have a certain end time. There's sort of the largest gathering of education innovators and technologists and investors and so on is in San Diego in April, and it's called ASU GSV Summit.
Okay.
So we do a pitch event at that time. And then we also do a pitch event in demo day at USC. But I also want to say that we were a bit troubled by accelerators being very focused on the money race. A common issue for all the companies for sure, but to us, sort of efficacy, impact was at least, well, I should say is more important for us. Yeah. So that's something very much that we look at.
Yeah.
What kind of impact do you have? What kind of impact might you have? And who is it impacting?
Yeah, and with the 7 months of the program, I mean, how hands-on? You said there's every month there's a thing you're doing virtual, but what other things are involved with that?
Yeah, so no, we'll do virtual workshops sort of once, twice a week.
Okay. Oh, that frequently.
Yeah. Once we get that going, and introducing them to folks that typically, our experience is, if you're an entrepreneur who's a woman or a person of color, you probably don't have access to the same folks that the rest of us might. And so we try, but yet this is a pretty tight community. So once we start introducing them to those folks and they follow up, I think things can even out a bit for them. But that 7 months. We also try and respect the fact that they're entrepreneurs, they're busy. It's your choice whether you want to participate in a workshop or not, and some of the other things that we have. But we try not to make it heavy in terms of requirements for them, and allow them to sort of pick and choose.
Yeah, and you don't have to necessarily choose one or two, but I'm curious, are there any ones that particularly stand out of your companies that have gone through this? And the reason I'm asking is to see what was it about them that actually made them stand out?
Yeah, in the first cohort, so I was at an event from the East Coast, and I was at an event in New York for entrepreneurs 3 years ago. And there was a woman who was talking about doing women's colleges in East Africa, and but with a particular focus on job skills.
Okay.
And I used to work at the World Bank and worked in East Africa for a while, and also did other projects there. I helped to start a nonprofit hospital company. So we did some things in East Africa. And so that really fascinated me because I know how difficult it is for women to get educated in Rwanda. And here was an American woman who at that point had been there 8 years, raised her family there, got married and all that. So like totally in. And then she was thinking about, okay, do I expand this for other women's colleges in Africa? Or, which means each time I do this, I have to raise money.
Yeah.
Because they're not really sustainable for the most part. Or do I start doing co-ed, and then do I stay in Africa, go outside of Africa? So she was sort of struggling with that, but she was just a terrific entrepreneur. And her name's Elizabeth Dearborn Hughes, and the company was Aquila. And then she did end up opening a co-ed college in Hong Kong, which I lived there at one point, and you think of it as being this very vibrant place, which it is.
Yeah.
But there are so many people just stuck in very small apartments with not much access to kind of formal education. So that's what she ended up doing, and she's very successful in raising the money. Now, we still all had this heart sort of desire for her to continue with the women's colleges in Africa.
Yeah.
But that is difficult. So she's I think she's expanding into Uganda and what have you. But she was just an inspiration to everyone too, I think. Hard work and very committed.
Yeah. What else? I'm just curious on characteristics of her that made her stand out. Just
perseverance.
Yeah.
And again, total commitment. And also desire to kind of get the pedagogy right. Brought in a few folks who, as it happened, we knew. So she did her research on that too. And she was trying to figure out some personalized learning. And then this question was, well, if you can create some sort of technology to do that and we can sell it, can we subsidize what we're doing here and so on. So she, just incredibly thoughtful about how to do it.
And now we'll take a quick break and hear from our sponsor, Brex. A big heartfelt thank you to Brex, who without their support, this show would not be possible. We've seen firsthand the difficulties accessing basic corporate credit without providing a security deposit or personal guarantee early on. As companies grow, managing expenses has become more difficult and time-consuming, which is why we've partnered with Brex to offer a corporate credit card that is not personally guaranteed, offers higher credit limits, provides auto reconciliation, and integrates with ERPs using receipt capture. Brex is the credit card of the startup ecosystem, and we highly encourage you to check them out. And back to the show. So Dean, Rossi or EdVenture is obviously not the only thing you're involved with right now. You're involved with Penn Venture Partners. And how did you go about raising the funds for that? Because it's a different type of model as well.
Yeah, so I had done a couple funds before that. We're very tech oriented. And I've always had an interest in economic development, particularly overseas. And so, again, worked for World Bank and then did a kind of children's hospital startup in developing countries. So I wanted sort of a different challenge in the industry. So we wanted to do something that was economic development oriented and focused on areas in Pennsylvania, kind of East Coast, that were underserved. So the SBA had an SBIC type of program just focused on that. But very difficult to raise money for that situation. So the SBA will give you sort of a match, let's call it. But the nice thing is, too, there are all sorts of benefits that come with that match to some of the investors who otherwise would not have invested. So on one hand, very difficult situation. On the other hand, we had help. So if you were a regional bank and you wanted to improve your CRA score, maybe you wanted to buy another bank or whatever, if you just invested in an SBIC, you got CRA credits. So several regional banks, like large regional banks, invested. And then there were a couple of foundations, so purely institutional, whereas the ones I did before were more high net worth people or investors. And, mainly raised the money in, the Mid-Atlantic. And then also raised money from the state of Pennsylvania. And then that determined some of our geography. But we could, I had portfolio companies that were very active out here in Southern California. Is here, some of them had operations in Europe, whatever. But kind of the core was there. So I should say that's sort of at the end of its life. And should be. So then the question was, what do I do next? And I did not want to do another venture fund. It's wonderful, but I wanted to do something different and wanted to come to Southern California and stay out here. I'd been here often. And that takes, it wasn't awful, but probably took about a year to raise.
Okay.
And that was not at the best time. It was around 2002, 2003, so after the bust. But we were coming out of that. So, but the downside, though, are those sort of investors, those sort of institutional investors do demand more reporting. That's a bit costly.
Yeah, costly. And with that too, I mean, how did you decide actually to go that route with raising? You had done different raises before. How did you decide, like, okay, wait, this is actually the thing I want to do for this next one?
Yeah, it went from, here's the type of fund we want to do. We want to do something that has an economic development purpose to it. Okay, so how do we make that happen? There's really only one way to do that.
That's the only route.
Now you see some funds that are far more impact oriented, where there are, I think, investors, family offices, foundations that are more willing to do that. Back then, it wasn't the case. There were very few like it, and we were still a venture fund in all other purposes and to all other effect.
Yeah, and with that too, obviously having ran venture funds, I mean, we talked about due diligence a little bit with the Ed Ventures thing as well, but through that as well, I mean, how do you kind of look at and evaluate companies for that?
That was a standard VC thing. You'd see, you try and get in as many companies as possible. So you'd see 100, and then you'd follow up on 10 or whatever, and then maybe you invest in one. It was just that kind of funnel. Which is wonderful to get a lay of the land. And frankly, at the time we did the fund, we weren't sure of the deal flow. So we were pleasantly surprised. And Diligence was pretty much like diligence you do for any fund. We had a very large checklist. You go down that, you collect all the documents. Lawyers have to look at a few things, and you go through it the same as I want to say a regular fund, but that's not correct. But same as most folks would do it. And it takes a while.
Yeah, and having gone through that too for a number of years, then, I mean, what are some of the reasons you've seen why startups fail in the first place?
Yeah, wow. So there are kind of well recognized reasons why they fail. So I'll try and think of some that aren't so well recognized. I think the relationship between the founder or founders and one another and the senior management team or whomever are incredibly important, but they don't spend enough time on it. And I think it's because you're trying to survive.
Yeah.
Right? But it's very important in my view for them to keep communications open. If there's a problem, identify it, solve it really quickly, because otherwise, people being people, then you start to get at one another, And before you know it, you're like a rock band, kind of arguing over everything, and that's just not going to work. And people are going to leave, and there'll be, sort of groups at odds with other groups.
Yeah.
I think that's highly important, and also too, and something still relevant for the education companies we look at. Not enough focus on getting revenue in and product market fit. You can, as you develop difficulties along the way, there are certain things that you'd rather do.
Yeah.
And entrepreneurs sometimes tend to do those, but you cannot. You have to be sort of razor focused on those sorts of things. And even to the detriment of raising money, I think, which is just incredibly difficult to do.
Yeah.
So decide early on that you may not get funding in the formal sense. So, go out there and make sure that you have a product that can sell. And in our case too, not only a product that can sell, but a product that can have an impact if we're talking about ed ventures.
Yeah, for sure. And then looking even at obviously the team is everything. And that's why a lot of startups fail, and people have echoed that too. But even with your experience so far in the last number of years, what have you either mentioned to the startup founders and about the team issue, how they can set themselves up, or what would you suggest they do to set themselves up for success within those relationships while they're actually trying to build a company?
Yeah, I think you have to be just very intentional about it. I'm not very prescriptive on stuff, but just keep reminding them, hey, you have these relationships, they're important. In some cases, they've had them for a long time, and it's a shame. So you want to, even if stuff goes wrong at the end of the day, it's important.
Yeah.
And you want to make sure that you're communicating with the folks, because some entrepreneurs too, I think, are very laser focused, right? So they forget about relationships with people, and they are the ones, as they would tell you, who care the most about the success of the company. So that kind of blinds you to a few other things. So yeah, I think, I'm not going to say it's that easy, but it's kind of, that's the advice.
Yeah.
And there's certain ways you can do that. It just depends on what they're like.
Yeah.
How they communicate.
Yeah, and now looking at the kind of the EdTech space, what are some things you're excited about, or things you're seeing that you just really want people to work on in that space? I'm just curious on any perspective that you have on the space as a whole.
Yeah, it's something, and this kind of goes to the investment thesis too. So it's something we all know because we've been in the system, which is that system has hardly changed in, pick it, 100 years, 200 years, 300 years, whatever. And so it's ripe for disruption.
Yeah.
Now, can it be, if you're talking about, kindergarten through 12th grade, which is largely a public good, how can that be changed? Because at least I think historically in the U.S. kind of achieved the goal of making sure that everyone has access to education. So now what's the quality like?
Yeah.
And what's equitable access like? And that doesn't mean, in my view, reducing access by those who can get quality education. Sort of evening things out a bit. And I think that technology is maybe the only way we can do that, and certainly can make some things scale. But there are many, many interesting, I'll call them interventions out there, going through early childhood, again, through workforce. So that's exciting. And you have folks even, on the USC campus too, undergrads. Again, they've all been through the system, and so I'm mentoring a company there now too, where I just found a very practical gap in the experience of post-secondary students. I'm like, wow, and probably encouraged them to keep at it.
Yeah.
So there are sort of very discrete interventions there. Then the question is kind of, how do you put them together? What do you focus on? Can the system even reliably include folks like that and entrepreneurs like that? And so far the answer to that's no. So then, are we looking at more of a private sector focus, kind of supplemental education, and do the school districts have certain schools that are maybe more oriented toward innovation or not?
Yeah.
And then, how do you help the teachers with the workload that's already significant? And, they're, if you look at K through 12, just even controlling a classroom is tough. I don't care where that classroom is. It's just a matter of how difficult it is.
Yeah, people that age.
Yeah, yeah, having been one of them.
Yes, everyone has at one point. At one point gone through that. Yeah. I mean, to that point then, in EdTech itself, I mean, are there specific challenges that these startup founders are facing in EdTech that that this is going to be a challenge? Like anything you want to mention on that?
Yeah, and I kind of alluded to this before. It's, okay, you have a product.
Yeah.
And maybe you're tech focused or maybe you're pedagogically focused, something, right? But you still have this issue of, how do I know it works? Because again, you're probably going into a market that's very, it's controlled by the public sector,
right?
For better or for worse. But that's a different kind of sale, and it's a different kind of even ability to just do a pilot, right? So it's being able to afford them the opportunity to just check it out. Is it efficacious? Are we meeting the needs of students, or is this just a cool piece of technology? Yeah. So that's difficult, and that goes for, I think, along that continuum of learning, the whole way. It's just probably, in a sense, gets easier as you get to adults, because then it's mainly a private sector thing, and then it almost is a B2C or something like that.
Yeah. And with the companies you're working with already, do you see most of them going private sector because it's just too difficult to change anything, or what have you seen so far?
Wow. It's not clear to me.
Not clear.
Yeah. But I would probably encourage most of them, to the extent, unless we can get them pilots, you have to think of a way to get it into the hands of the learner or into the hands of the parent or custodian or whatever.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I think most investors in education would tell you this: the sales cycle, at least in K through 12, is too long, too complicated.
Yeah.
Maybe too political. So it does complicate things when you think about the whole market you're aiming at has a lot of barriers.
Yeah.
More so than most, but it's a humongous market, like healthcare, right?
Right. Which is obviously a need to improve always in everything. Especially that.
Yeah, no, I agree. So the challenge is certainly there, but it's fun, and everyone has experience, with the system.
Yeah.
And they have opinions on it, whether they're practitioners or users, whatever.
Yeah, and with that too, so everyone having their opinions, and how's your team, like the team you have in place for EdVentures, and how do you work together to help these companies or find companies, like as a team yourself? I'm curious how you guys kind of.
Yeah, it's neat because again, I don't think we're that smart to put each other together, but the one is dual faculty at Viterbi, the School of Engineering,
yep,
and at Rossier, the School of Ed, which is itself really rare, and grew up in probably a difficult school environment, and then the other has experience, almost like a thought leader. He was the first person I knew to kind of put together a group of folks interested in innovative approaches to education, particularly involving technology. And this was like 15 years ago at Penn. And then I'm an investor.
Yeah.
And then there are other folks too that help us out, one way or another.
Yeah.
But that's sort of the core.
And with, obviously you're coming from that investing background. I mean, have you seen already, or do you think there's going to be more accelerators, incubators, venture firms focus on EdTech?
There's a fair amount now, but yeah, no, I guess that will be the case. And maybe it will even reflect what I see in venture as a whole, which is, the earlier part of the early stage investing is now, diligence. A lot of it's being done by accelerators, and it's organized. Like I say, it's sort of organized angel investors, and it's very fragmented. I think particularly in a place like Los Angeles.
Yeah.
Very difficult to figure out who's investing in what and where and what have you.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then with you mentioning you switched back in 2018 when you started this, and then even you want to change directions. Why did you decide to actually change directions in terms of your focus on your career, from not doing the venture fund to more so the EdTech and different space?
I've always approached my work life in kind of an opportunistic way. So if there was something I was interested in, I tried to do it. And then, as a matter of, as you'll find later on, you get to a certain point in your life where it's like, I want to do something a little bit different, but take advantage of things that I've learned and work with people I enjoy and not with people I don't. And for a cause that I think is worthwhile and not just, kind of a, almost purely commercial purpose behind it. Not that that was necessarily the case before, but, it can be.
Yeah.
So you have to be careful. And then, doing it out here, it's a matter of weather.
Wait, you like it in Los Angeles?
I happen to like it very much. So, yeah, just a kind of phase of life where you just wanted a new challenge.
Yeah.
All the way around. So maybe I bit off more than I can chew, but, it's wonderful. And I can also say, too, so the university system out here, and I don't mean the UC system, I mean all the schools here,
yeah.
I think are generally more open-minded, innovative, and encouraging of students who want to do that. And it's, and I also think that Southern California, particularly LA, has a lot going for it. And I would think, with respect to education or technology in general, is a great place to be at this time.
Yeah, and obviously being in Los Angeles now for a bit and having connected with more people and everything too, if someone's interested in EdTech and they're looking at what options they have for support, I mean, there's obviously Rossier Adventures, but what else is there for them that you know of in Los Angeles even?
Wow, so this is something we're trying to sort of build up.
Okay.
And to that end, we just had a group where we took a bunch of stakeholders from all over Southern California to kind of talk about this. How do you? Okay, so technology absolutely doesn't solve everything, particularly in education. But it's an enabler, and it's
right.
important in some, like I said, for scale and to get some interventions out to folks who need it. Without going through normal channels. So how do we know who's doing some of these things? And how do we encourage folks to do more of it? I think it's very nascent here. Again, and very, very fragmented.
Yeah.
So there are certainly venture funds who will invest in it, but like me before, as part of a portfolio. Yeah, and it's an important part of a portfolio, but if you're a general kind of multi-sector, venture fund, you wouldn't want to put a whole lot of emphasis on it. And in the case of education, for pure venture, it's not had the kind of exits that a lot of other sectors have had. So you have to go into it with that in mind. Anyway, so that's something we're working on, and it'll take a decade or whatever.
Yeah. But
it's interesting. It's fun. You meet some great folks.
Yeah, and with Adventures too. Then I mean, looking forward kind of for Adventures, for Rossier Adventures, are you going to be taking on more companies, and in terms of like you try to ramp up to do more companies? Like, I'm just curious what the plans are kind of for moving
Yeah,
forward.
so we want to have sort of a regional focus, as in, can we help matters in Southern California?
Yeah.
And if so, how do we do that? But we also have a global focus. So that will lead to some changes in the portfolio. So right now, we're putting together what we understand to be the first global collaboration of EdTech incubators. So it's Finland, it's Singapore, it's us.
Wow.
And it's sort of important to have a strong core group, and we know these folks. And of course, those are, 2 countries, very small, but excel in, PISA scores and things like that. So I think, you could say they're small, and so that's, that's not always applicable to us, but I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah.
I think it is. And so what we want to do then, too, is reach out to some other EdTech incubators, in Latin America and Asia and Africa, and start to, and Europe, and start to kind of build that ecosystem, but not anything that's administratively heavy, just, a collaboration, kind of figure it out as we go along. But we've sort of taken it upon ourselves to start that.
Yeah.
And for us, all of us have sort of a global perspective anyway. And I think there's, we need that sharing in education. And we certainly don't have all the answers to that.
Yeah.
And, but what we do know, we should share and be willing to take the examples of others.
Yeah. And Dean, where can people go to actually apply to the programs that you guys have? Yeah.
Yeah, so we right now we only do it once a year.
Okay.
So the second cohort, we've had the evaluation process, and we're about to go on. But probably about next summer be the same thing. But if we have a website in USC, and so do that. And if in the meantime they have an interest, my partners and I are always available and love to chat with folks.
Yeah.
Which is not to say we can be helpful, but we want to be. So it's meant to be sort of a public good. So yeah, reach out to us.
What's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Wow, should I give my email address?
That is completely up to you, Dean.
They can.
They can also go to USC's site potentially, whatever is easiest for you.
Yeah,
What do you prefer?
Come to think of that, I don't know that we're very good at. Well, there we go. I think on our website, we probably don't have that link to us. So yeah, they're welcome to connect with me, Dean, Klin at usc.edu.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Dean, thank you so much for the time today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you. It's enjoyable.
Thanks for checking out Startup 2.0 from Spark XYZ. If you want to learn more about startups and investing, you can check us out and join the ecosystem at sparkxyz.io.